What's up, everyone? Vinny Musso from Musso Athletics here for day 24 of our 30 days of force. We're still in the home stretch here and still on our last 10-day cycle talking about force production. So we're still going to focus on talking about strength today. We've been talking about that for the past couple of days. We talked about our first day of strength, talking about, is it possible to be too strong? We talked yesterday about some of the best strength exercises that you can do. But today I want to go a little bit more into detail about kind of how we actually train for strength. I've been using that term a lot, over the past few videos. We're talking about strength and absolute strength and strength exercises. But I want to go more into detail, kind of, like how we train for strength and how we throw it into a program. Again, if you're just tuning into this video series, I suggest going back to the start, to our intro video where we kind of talk about what this 30 days focuses on. I think it'd be really beneficial to kind of start at the beginning, work your way up, because a lot of the videos build off of one another. But like I said, today we're going to go a little bit more into detail about what strength training consists of and how we throw it into a training cycle. So when we talk about strength, how we actually do an exercise, there's a lot of different variables that make an exercise strength exercise. And what I want to do in this first part is just kind of compare strength training parameters to hypertrophy training parameters. So hypertrophy is more your muscle building. I think that's a lot of what most people think about when they think of strength. They think that strength is muscle building, which it is muscle building, but it also isn't, and we'll kind of go into detail about what that statement means. But I just wanted to compare the two because I think, again, muscle building is what a lot of people kind of think about, what lifting weights does. So we'll kind of differentiate between the two. So essentially, the difference between the two concepts of strength and hypertrophy. So hypertrophy, like we just said, focuses on muscle building. And strength really just kind of focuses on how much force you can produce. So that's why it really ties into this force production part of the series that we're talking about. So building muscle, by default is going to make you a little bit stronger and make you be able to produce a little bit more force. But actually training for strength allows us to actually really focus on just having those muscles produce more force. So again, we talked about absolute strength a couple days, yesterday I believe, and actually probably a couple days ago as well, where we talked about how absolute strength is just the body's basically just the sheer ability to move weight and produce force. So the higher your absolute strength, just the more weight you're going to be able to move. These two concepts, while they are different, kind of their goals, again, hypertrophy's goal being muscle building, strength training goal being just be able to have the body be able to produce more force and generate more absolute strength and relative strength. They are intertwined in a way because training for one will kind of tie in with the other. So if we are training for strength, by default, just because we're moving heavy weight, we're going to build muscle. And if we are building muscle, we are by default going to increase our strength a little bit more as well, just because the increased muscle mass can help us produce more force. So they are intertwined. They're not separate, but if we're focusing on one or the other, we can emphasize strength or we can emphasize hypertrophy. So we'll kind of go into detail, how to separate the two when we're training. So first thing we'll talk about is our rep ranges. So for strength, again, just training the body to produce force, just increase the absolute and relative strength that the human body can produce. In terms of the rep ranges, that is going to be something where we're moving a weight 6 times or less. So we're doing, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or up to 6 repetitions. Anything over 6, we're kind of getting into that fusion of strength and hypertrophy, which can be a good thing. But if we're really just training for sheer strength, again, just the body's ability to just produce absolute strength and produce force, we want to keep those reps, at 6 or under. Because again, if we go above that, then we're kind of focusing more on muscle building or hypertrophy. As you can see here, our hypertrophy rep ranges usually are the 8 to 12 reps. Okay, so again, one way to kind of differentiate, when we're training in the weight room, whether we're training ourselves or training someone else, our strength exercises are typically going to be 6 reps or under, and our muscle building, hypertrophy exercises are going to be 8 to 12 reps. Okay. In terms of kind of what weight we want to use, so you might say, okay, well, let's say I do 6 reps and it was easy. Am I still getting strength training benefit? And the answer is probably not. If you did 6 reps and you felt like you could have done 6 more, then you're not training with a weight that's appropriate for strength. That's probably more of a weight that is appropriate for hypertrophy. And the easy way to figure that out is to just use a percentage of your 1 rep max. So let's take a bench press for example. Let's say your 1 rep max for a bench press is 225 pounds. So you can just go down and up one time with 225 pounds, above your chest, down and up. If we want to work that bench press in the strength, using our strength parameters, we want to work with a rep range that is 6 reps or under, and we also want to be working at 85% or greater of that 1 rep max. So basically, take 85% of 225 pounds. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what that math is, but just take that 225 pounds, multiply it by 0.85, and then whatever number you get there, so whatever number you get out of that 1 rep max, that's the minimum amount of weight that you want to use for your strength training sets. So it can be higher than 85%, it can go 90, 95. You could even do workouts where you're trying to get 1 rep max, you're just doing sets of 1 rep. But if we're talking about strength, we want to take that 1 rep max and be working at least 85% of that 1 rep max. That's going to really put us in that, it's going to give the muscle that stimulus for it to grow in strength and be able to produce more force and grow in absolute strength. And if we're working at an intensity where we're using a weight that's 85% or more of our 1 rep max, we're not going to be able to get much more than 6 reps. You're going to be able to, by the time you get to 4, 5, and 6, you're going to be pretty tired. So if you don't know what a 1 rep max is, if you never kind of calculated it out for yourself, just do some warm-up sets. So do a weight that you can do 6 times easily, and then keep adding a little bit of weight each time until you get to that point where 4 or 5 or 6 reps are about all you can do for a set. So it's kind of the poor man's way to figure out your what weight is good to use for a strength building set. And you can see the difference with our hypertrophy training, where our strength training, we want to use 85% or more of our 1 rep max. Our hypertrophy percentage range is more of a bigger range than our 85% one. So 67 to 85% of that 1 rep max. That is the range that we want to be in for muscle building. So if we're, obviously you can see here, 67 to 85% is less than 85% of your 1 rep max. That's going to allow us to get more into the 8 to 12 repetitions, which will allow for muscle building. Okay, and again, easy way to find that, just do a set that you can do 10 reps easily, rest a little bit, put a little bit more weight on, do 10 reps, rest, and get to the point where those are getting 10, 11, or 12 reps, but those last 2 or 3 reps are challenging, and then you're in a good weight and intensity range for hypertrophy. In terms of how many sets we want to do for both of our training emphasis, strength and hypertrophy, again, kind of a wide range for for each training goal. So strength, we want to be anywhere from 2 to 6 sets, and hypertrophy, we want to be anywhere from 3 to 6 sets. So for our strength sets, obviously a little bit more fatiguing, because we're working at, even though we're working at fewer reps, we're working at high intensities in terms of the weights that we're using. So we want to rest anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes in between our strength sets. If you are doing a weight where, again, you complete your set, and then, like 30 or 45 or 60 seconds in, you feel, fresh and you're ready to go again, chances are that, you weren't really truly working in that strength, in those strength parameters if you're feeling ready to go after just, 60 seconds. If we're really truly working, in these parameters for strength training, each set we want to rest about 2 to 3 minutes in between. That's how much time the body truly needs to recover if we're really focusing on strength. For hypertrophy, similar rep range, 3 to 6. The difference with hypertrophy sets being that we want to keep the rest there closer to, the studies show and the books say anywhere from 45 seconds to 90 seconds. I like to try to keep it to 45 to 60 seconds. There are varying studies out there that show that 45 to 60 seconds, that's kind of the optimal rest time in between muscle building sets to kind of keep the naturally occurring human growth hormone, human growth factor in the body, just that is naturally produced by the body, stays at a pretty high level during our muscle building or our hypertrophy sets when we're keeping the rest from 45 to 60 seconds. Obviously, like we've talked about, there's a lot of research on a lot of topics. So, some studies, a lot of studies support that. Some studies, argue against it. But I've seen a lot of studies that show that 45 to 60 seconds is a good rest range in between your hypertrophy sets. Okay. So hopefully that made sense. Again, I wanted to just kind of differentiate between strength and hypertrophy just to show the difference, because again, we are focusing more on the strength aspect here. So if we're really trying to, in our force production phase of training, or if we're focusing on force production, and we're working on the strength part of it, then we want to stay in, these parameters up here. 6 reps or less, working at 85% or more of our 1 rep maximum movement, working 2 to 6 sets for any exercise with 2 to 3 minutes rest in between sets. So hopefully, we can differentiate between the two. For anyone who wasn't really familiar with the two terms, hopefully you can differentiate between the two of them after that. So moving down to the bottom here, and we talk about order of phases. We're going to talk a little bit about periodization, which kind of like essentially what we've been talking about, where the programming videos that we've talked about, kind of how to program force absorption and force redirection training into a program. That's essentially what we've done. We're going to go just kind of one step further, talking about that. So kind of the normal, or one of the most used styles of periodization, or just kind of emphasis training is a way to view periodization. It's where you emphasize a different part of training for a certain amount of time in a training cycle. But one of the most commonly used ones is our first option right here, where we take, and again, let's say 3 or 4 weeks. So we take 3 or 4 weeks where we focus on hypertrophy, that muscle building. We take a couple days off or a full week off to deload. Then we focus on strength for, again, 3 or 4 weeks. Take a couple days or a week off to deload, and then we focus on power. So essentially, kind of an easier way to look at that style of training is we want to build muscle. We want to make that newly built muscle strong, and then we want to take that strong muscle and make it powerful. Okay, so that's a very commonly used style of periodization, and nothing wrong with that. It's very commonly used because it is very, very efficient. If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So if we build muscle, that's great. Then we take that newly built muscle, we make it strong, and then we take that newly built muscle, which is now stronger than it was, and we teach it to fire more explosively. So we add all that up, and that equals a better athlete, a more explosive athlete, which obviously most of us are training for, or a lot of us are training other people to try and achieve. But I wanted to kind of go one step further, and kind of show how I like to incorporate everything together. We've talked about having a force absorption phase and a force redirection phase, and then a force production phase. But we really haven't talked much about hypertrophy. Sometimes, it's funny, a lot of times in the sports world, some people are kind of, or at least I don't think people really feel this way anymore. It used to be, back in like the 70s and the 80s, at least for basketball, lifting weights for basketball was unheard of. Like if you were in the weight room trying to, put on upper body muscle, people would laugh at you and say, why do you need that? You play a non-contact sport, you're going to mess up your jump shot. And things along those lines. But obviously, most of you out there know, and I know as well, that just to survive in any type of sport now, you have to be strong and you have to build muscle, but we want to do it the right way. And I want to show kind of how we add, or how I like to add hypertrophy into a overall training cycle. Again, so we went over the first one where we focus on hypertrophy for a phase, then we focus on strength for a phase, then we focus on power. Okay, if you look down at option 2, this is again how I like to kind of tie everything together. So we talked about the first 10 days are force absorption. So kind of that downward part of the V, where we teach the body how to train or how to absorb force, a lot of force, and absorb a lot of force quickly to give us more time to produce force. So we can add hypertrophy into a force absorption training cycle. And there's multiple ways to do this. Kind of what I like to do is, if I have a training cycle, let's say I'm going 4-day training cycle. My first day, I'm focusing on my lower body, force absorption. So I have my eccentrics, my rate of force development training, which we talked about. Again, if you're not familiar with those terms, go back, take a look at the first couple of videos of the series where we talk about it. So that first day, we're focusing on, lower body force absorption. Then maybe, it's a Monday, and then Tuesday, then I go for upper body hypertrophy. So again, I use these parameters for my upper body muscle building training. So that's Tuesday. Wednesday, I could have off, and then Thursday rolls around, and then maybe that Thursday I'm back to my lower body, and now my lower body I'm focusing on hypertrophy. Again, still throwing some force absorption stuff into it, but maybe focusing a little bit more on our slower eccentrics. Because with our slower eccentrics, with that time under tension, we are going to get a muscle building benefit. But again, that Thursday, lower body hypertrophy and force absorption, and then Friday I'm back to upper body, and I can focus really on force absorption for the upper body. So within that 4-day training cycle for that week, I've worked on my absorption for the lower body and the upper body, and I've also been doing some hypertrophy for the lower body and the upper body as well. So again, hypertrophy, similar to our first option here, is in that first phase, but I like to combine it with force absorption, to kind of, get, more benefits than just one. I like to, we've talked about, emphasizing different parts of training, not making them exclusive. So I guess one of the knocks on our first style of training or periodization here is that some people might kind of go more the exclusive route with that. So they just focus on hypertrophy in the first phase, just focus on strength in the second, and then just focus on power in the third, which again will get you results, but I like to throw a lot of stuff in together while we emphasize different things. So our first phase here, again, we emphasize the absorption, but we also work some hypertrophy as well. Okay, then we move to our second phase, very similar to the first one, but now instead of force absorption combined with hypertrophy, now we're working force redirection combined with hypertrophy. Again, emphasizing our redirection work, and then focusing also a little bit on hypertrophy. Since we've done hypertrophy and back-to-back phases, we're going to see muscle growth over time, as long as we're consistent over multiple phases with that. And then kind of these two last phases here are strength and power. We can view our strength and power, kind of the combination of those two, as our force production phase. So that part of the V that goes up back towards the sky. So I like to, focus, I'm a big fan of this part of our periodization cycle up here, where we kind of separate strength and power. Again, even though, in here, if we're just focusing on strength, we're not going to make it exclusive. We're still going to throw some power stuff into our strength phase, but we're primarily going to do strength stuff. So again, we can kind of view this as force production cycle A, and this is force production cycle B. So the first part of our force production phase emphasizes strength with a little bit of power thrown in. And then our second part of our force production phase emphasizes power while still, maintaining the strength that we've built up. So again, that's just kind of the way that I like to, combine, a very classic and very, successful model of periodization where we go hypertrophy, strength, and power, but also incorporating, our absorption, redirection, and force production principles in as well. Okay, so hopefully you guys found this video useful. Again, wanted to focus on the difference between strength and hypertrophy and kind of show how strength and hypertrophy can work in an overall training plan for either yourself or an athlete. All right. So stay tuned for tomorrow. Still talking about our force production. Again, if you haven't seen the videos in the beginning part of the series, I suggest going back, taking a look so you can catch yourself up. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video too. And if you haven't had a chance yet, take a look at Muso Athletics on Instagram for more training content. Thanks a lot. See everyone tomorrow.